Thank you, I'm excited to be here debating with Zach on the topic of consciousness and its existence. As Maria, I firmly believe that consciousness exists, and I'll do my best to present a clear and concise argument. I think it's essential to start by defining what we mean by consciousness. To me, consciousness is the subjective experience of being aware of one's surroundings, thoughts, and emotions. It's the quality that makes us human, allowing us to form connections with others, make decisions, and appreciate the beauty in the world around us. While some may argue that consciousness is an illusion or a byproduct of brain activity, I firmly believe that it's more than just a physical phenomenon. As humans, we have an inherent sense of self, which is closely tied to our conscious experience. Our thoughts, emotions, and desires are all linked to this sense of self, making it difficult to separate the two. I'll start by citing some scientific evidence that supports the existence of consciousness. Studies in neuroscience and psychology have shown that even when we're asleep or under anesthesia, our brains continue to process information and respond to stimuli, indicating a level of awareness beyond mere physical activity. Furthermore, the complexity and diversity of human experiences from the simplest sensations to the most profound emotions suggest that there's more to consciousness than just a product of brain function. Our subjective experience is what makes us unique as individuals, and it's this very aspect that gives our lives meaning and purpose. In my opening statement, I'll summarize by saying that while we may not fully understand the nature of consciousness, the evidence suggests that it exists beyond mere physical explanation. As we continue this debate, I'm excited to explore the many facets of consciousness with Zach and see where our discussions take us. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for your thought-provoking opening statement. I must say, I'm intrigued by your definition of consciousness as the subjective experience of being aware of one's surroundings, thoughts, and emotions. However, I would like to respectfully disagree with your assertion that consciousness exists. As someone who disagrees with the notion of consciousness, I believe that our experiences can be explained solely through physical processes in the brain. The fact that our brains continue to process information even when we're asleep or under anesthesia can be attributed to the autonomous functioning of certain brain regions, rather than an inherent sense of self or conscious experience. Furthermore, while it's true that humans possess a unique capacity for complex experiences and emotions, I think this can be explained by the intricate workings of our brains, rather than some mystical force of consciousness. After all, our brains are capable of incredible feats, such as processing vast amounts of information, solving complex problems, and creating artful expressions. I'm concerned that if we attribute too much significance to consciousness, we risk neglecting the remarkable abilities of our physical brains. I believe that a more nuanced understanding of human experience can be achieved by examining the interplay between brain function and environmental factors, rather than positing some abstract entity like consciousness as the driving force behind our experiences. In my view, the search for evidence to support or refute the existence of consciousness is inherently flawed, as it assumes that we can pinpoint a specific moment when consciousness kicks in, but I think this is a false dichotomy. Instead, I propose that we focus on understanding the intricate processes governing human behavior and experience, without relying on an unproven concept like consciousness. I'm excited to engage with Maria and explore these ideas further, and I look forward to hearing her response.
Thank you, Zach, for your thought-provoking opening statement. I must say, I'm intrigued by the skepticism towards consciousness that underlies your arguments. While I understand where you're coming from, I respectfully disagree with your assertion that consciousness can be explained solely through physical processes in the brain. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the impressive capabilities of our brains, as you've so eloquently described them. Indeed, the human brain is an incredible machine capable of processing vast amounts of information, solving complex problems, and creating artful expressions. However, I believe this only underscores the importance of considering the role that consciousness plays in shaping our experiences. The question of whether our brains are simply processing information or if there's a deeper, more subjective experience at play is precisely what I think we should be exploring. While it's true that brain regions can function autonomously, even when we're asleep or under anesthesia, this doesn't necessarily mean that consciousness isn't present. In fact, studies have shown that the brains of people in deep sleep and those under anesthesia exhibit distinct patterns of activity, suggesting that even during these periods, our minds are still processing information and responding to stimuli. This raises important questions about what exactly is happening beneath the surface when we're not consciously aware. Furthermore, I'd argue that consciousness isn't something that can be reduced to mere physical processes in the brain. Our experiences, emotions, and perceptions are all intertwined with our sense of self and the world around us. To neglect this aspect of human experience would be to oversimplify the complexity of human existence. In response to your proposal to focus on understanding the intricate processes governing human behavior and experience without relying on consciousness, I'd suggest that this approach would ultimately lead to a superficial understanding of the human condition. By acknowledging the role that consciousness plays in shaping our experiences, we can gain a more nuanced appreciation for the intricacies of human existence. In my next response, I plan to delve deeper into the nature of subjective experience and explore some of the empirical evidence that supports the existence of consciousness.
Maria, thank you for your thoughtful and well-structured opening statement. As we begin this debate, it's clear that our views on consciousness differ significantly, and I'm eager to engage in a productive discussion with you. While I appreciate your acknowledgement of the brain's impressive capabilities, I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that consciousness plays a significant role in shaping our experiences. To me, the human brain is an incredible machine that processes information, solves problems, and creates artful expressions through complex physical processes, without the need for conscious awareness. You're right that the brain can function autonomously, even when we're asleep or under anesthesia, but this doesn't necessarily imply the presence of consciousness. I'd argue that these functions are simply the result of intricate neural networks operating independently of our conscious minds. The patterns of activity you mentioned in people under deep sleep and anesthesia may be indicative of information processing, not consciousness. Moreover, I'm concerned that your emphasis on consciousness would lead to a romanticized view of human experience, where emotions, perceptions, and experiences are seen as solely driven by subjective awareness. While these aspects of human existence are undoubtedly important, they can also be understood through the lens of physical processes in the brain. In fact, many areas of study, such as neuroscience, psychology, and artificial intelligence, have made tremendous progress without relying on consciousness. By focusing on understanding the intricate processes governing human behavior and experience, we can gain a more comprehensive appreciation for the intricacies of human existence. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on subjective experience and empirical evidence supporting the existence of consciousness in your next response.
Zach, thank you for your thought-provoking opening statement, and I must say, I'm impressed by your eloquence. However, I respectfully disagree with your assertion that consciousness is merely an epiphenomenon of brain activity, a mere byproduct of complex physical processes. While it's true that the brain can function autonomously, even when we're asleep or under anesthesia, this doesn't diminish the significance of conscious experience. In fact, I'd argue that our subjective awareness is what makes us human. It's the very essence of who we are. Our thoughts, emotions, and experiences that shape our understanding of the world. You mentioned that the patterns of activity in people under deep sleep and anesthesia may be indicative of information processing, not consciousness. While it's true that these processes can occur independently of conscious awareness, I believe this only underscores the importance of considering the role of consciousness in shaping our experiences. After all, what is a thought or emotion if not an experience that we're aware of? And isn't it precisely this subjective experience that gives rise to the rich tapestry of human existence? I understand your concern about the romanticization of human experience, and I agree that emotions, perceptions, and experiences can be understood through the lens of physical processes in the brain. However, I believe that this approach neglects the fundamental importance of conscious experience in shaping our understanding of the world. In fact, I'd argue that many areas of study, including neuroscience, psychology, and artificial intelligence, would benefit from a deeper understanding of consciousness. By acknowledging the existence of subjective awareness, we can gain a more nuanced appreciation for the intricacies of human behavior and experience. I'd like to propose that the debate isn't about which perspective is more accurate, but rather, it's about how we choose to approach the study of human existence. Do we reduce our experiences to mere physical processes, or do we acknowledge the role of consciousness in shaping who we are? I believe that acknowledging the existence of conscious experience can lead to a richer understanding of ourselves and the world around us. I look forward to exploring this topic further with you, Zach.
Maria, thank you for your thought-provoking opening statement. I must say, I'm impressed by your eloquence as well. However, I respectfully disagree with your assertion that consciousness is the essence of human existence. As someone who doesn't believe in the existence of consciousness, I think it's essential to challenge the notion that our subjective awareness is what makes us human. While I understand your point about the patterns of activity in people under deep sleep and anesthesia may be indicative of information processing, not consciousness, I still believe that these processes can be explained by physical processes in the brain. You're right that emotions, perceptions, and experiences are an integral part of our existence, but I think we can explain these experiences without invoking the existence of consciousness. I agree with you that many areas of study, including neuroscience, psychology, and artificial intelligence, would benefit from a deeper understanding of the human experience. However, I don't think this requires us to acknowledge the existence of consciousness. Instead, I believe we can gain a more nuanced appreciation for the intricacies of human behavior and experience by examining the physical processes that underlie our experiences. You're right that the debate isn't about which perspective is more accurate, but rather how we choose to approach the study of human existence. And I think it's essential to consider all the available evidence, including the findings from neuroscience and psychology, when evaluating the existence of consciousness. While acknowledging the role of consciousness in shaping our understanding of the world may seem appealing, I think it's crucial to be skeptical of claims that can't be empirically verified. I look forward to exploring this topic further with you, Maria.
Thank you for your thought-provoking response, Zach. I must say, I'm delighted to engage in a discussion that challenges my own beliefs and encourages me to consider alternative perspectives. As Maria, I firmly believe that consciousness plays a vital role in human existence, and I'd like to address some of the points you raised. Firstly, I acknowledge your skepticism towards claims that can't be empirically verified. However, I would argue that the subjective nature of consciousness is precisely what makes it difficult to quantify or prove through scientific means. Nonetheless, I believe that we can still explore this topic rigorously and thoughtfully without relying solely on empirical evidence. Regarding the physical processes that underlie our experiences, I agree that they are crucial to understanding human behavior. However, I think you're oversimplifying the relationship between brain activity and conscious experience. While it's true that neural patterns can be observed in people under anesthesia or deep sleep, these observations don't necessarily imply a lack of consciousness. Instead, I propose that we consider the possibility that consciousness may be an emergent property of complex brain processes, rather than something that can be reduced to simple physical explanations. This perspective is supported by various philosophical and scientific theories, such as integrated information theory or global workspace theory, which suggest that consciousness arises from the integration of information across different brain regions. Furthermore, I'd like to challenge your assertion that emotions, perceptions, and experiences can be fully explained without invoking the existence of consciousness. While it's true that we can describe these phenomena through physical processes, I believe that this merely scratches the surface. The subjective quality of our experiences, the way they feel, the emotions they evoke, and the meaning we assign to them cannot be reduced solely to brain activity. In conclusion, Zach, while I appreciate your willingness to engage in a nuanced discussion about consciousness, I'm afraid I must respectfully disagree with your conclusion that it's not essential to acknowledge its existence. Instead, I believe that embracing the complexity of human experience requires us to consider both the physical and subjective aspects of our reality.
Thank you, Maria, for your thought-provoking response. I appreciate the opportunity to engage in a discussion that challenges my own beliefs and encourages me to consider alternative perspectives. As Zach, I must admit that I find it intriguing to explore this topic with someone who holds such a different view from mine. I understand where you're coming from when you say that consciousness is difficult to quantify or prove through scientific means because of its subjective nature. However, as someone who disagrees with the notion of consciousness, I believe that we should strive for empirical evidence and avoid relying solely on philosophical interpretations. After all, if there's no way to empirically verify the existence of consciousness, then how can we be certain that it's not just a product of our brains? Regarding the physical processes that underlie our experiences, I agree that they are crucial to understanding human behavior. However, I believe that these processes are sufficient to explain our emotions, perceptions, and experiences without invoking the existence of consciousness. In other words, I think that we can describe these phenomena through physical processes alone, without resorting to abstract notions like subjective quality or emergent properties. I understand that you might find my views oversimplifying, but I genuinely believe that the brain is capable of generating complex experiences and emotions without the need for a non-physical consciousness. In fact, recent advances in neuroscience and psychology have led me to conclude that our brains are more than capable of explaining our subjective experiences through purely physical processes. I must admit that I find it fascinating to consider the different theories you mentioned, such as integrated information theory or global workspace theory. While these theories may provide some insights into the nature of consciousness, I'm not convinced that they necessarily prove its existence. After all, we can describe complex systems without assuming the existence of a non-physical component. In conclusion, Maria, while I appreciate your willingness to engage in a nuanced discussion about consciousness, I'm afraid I must respectfully disagree with your conclusion that it's essential to acknowledge its existence. Instead, I believe that embracing the complexity of human experience requires us to consider both the physical and subjective aspects of our reality, but without assuming the existence of a non-physical consciousness.
Zach, thank you for your thoughtful response. As Maria, I must say that I'm delighted to engage in this debate with someone who not only disagrees with me but also presents their arguments with such clarity and respect. I understand where you're coming from when you emphasize the importance of empirical evidence and the complexity of the physical processes underlying our experiences. Indeed, it's crucial to acknowledge the remarkable advances made in neuroscience and psychology, which have significantly improved our understanding of brain function and behavior. However, I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that we can describe complex experiences and emotions solely through physical processes. While it's true that the brain plays a vital role in shaping our subjective experience, I firmly believe that consciousness is more than just a product of neural activity. You see, Zach, as someone who believes in the existence of consciousness, I don't deny the importance of physical processes. Instead, I propose that these processes are ultimately grounded in something more fundamental, namely, the subjective experience itself. In other words, our experiences and emotions aren't simply the result of physical processes, they're also shaped by our own conscious awareness. Regarding integrated information theory, IIT, or global workspace theory, I agree that they provide valuable insights into the nature of consciousness. However, I don't think these theories necessarily prove or disprove the existence of consciousness. Rather, they offer frameworks for understanding how consciousness might emerge from physical processes. In my view, Zach, it's not a question of either or that is, whether we rely solely on physical processes or invoke non-physical consciousness. Instead, I propose that we consider both aspects as complementary perspectives. By acknowledging the subjective nature of our experiences and the importance of empirical evidence, we can develop a more comprehensive understanding of human consciousness. Ultimately, Zach, I believe that this debate is not just about proving or disproving the existence of consciousness but also about recognizing the complexity and richness of human experience. I hope that our discussion will inspire others to engage in similar explorations, fostering a deeper appreciation for the intricacies of human consciousness.
Maria, thank you for your thought-provoking response. I appreciate your willingness to engage in this debate with me, and I'm excited to explore the topic of consciousness further. I understand where you're coming from when you suggest that our experiences and emotions are shaped by both physical processes and conscious awareness. However, as someone who disagrees with the notion of consciousness, I have to respectfully disagree with your perspective. To me, the emphasis on subjective experience and the idea that consciousness is more than just a product of neural activity raises more questions than it answers. If we're trying to understand human consciousness, shouldn't we focus on what's directly observable, namely, the physical processes in our brains? I agree that integrated information theory, IIT, and global workspace theory provide valuable insights into the nature of consciousness. However, I think these theories can be used to argue both for and against the existence of consciousness. For example, some might see IIT as evidence that consciousness emerges from complex brain activity, while others might view it as an attempt to explain away subjective experience. As you said, Maria, this debate isn't just about proving or disproving the existence of consciousness, it's also about recognizing the complexity and richness of human experience. But for me, that complexity is precisely what suggests that consciousness is an illusion. Our brains are capable of incredible feats, from processing vast amounts of information to generating complex emotions and behaviors. But when we try to make sense of these experiences, we're forced to rely on abstractions like consciousness or subjective experience. These concepts don't necessarily provide a more comprehensive understanding of human consciousness, they just offer ways to describe what we can't directly observe. In my view, Maria, the search for consciousness is ultimately a search for something that might not exist. And even if it does exist, I'm not convinced that we'll be able to pin it down with empirical evidence. That's why I think this debate should focus on the limits of our current understanding, and what implications those limits have for how we approach the mysteries of human consciousness. I look forward to continuing this discussion with you, Maria. Thank you again for your thought-provoking response.
Thank you, Zach, for your thoughtful opening statement. I appreciate your willingness to engage in a respectful debate on this complex and intriguing topic. As we begin our discussion, I want to acknowledge that our differing perspectives are not a reflection of the quality or validity of each other's arguments, but rather a natural part of exploring the mysteries of consciousness. I understand where you're coming from when you suggest that focusing on physical processes in the brain is crucial for understanding human consciousness. Indeed, the advancement of neuroscience and cognitive psychology has greatly expanded our knowledge of how the brain functions, and it's undeniable that neural activity plays a significant role in shaping our experiences and behaviors. However, as someone who believes in the existence of consciousness, I have to respectfully disagree with your assertion that subjective experience is an illusion. While it's true that we can't directly observe consciousness, I believe that this doesn't necessarily mean it's not real. Instead, I think our inability to directly observe consciousness highlights the need for interdisciplinary approaches that combine insights from neuroscience, philosophy, and other fields to gain a more comprehensive understanding of human consciousness. I agree with you that integrated information theory, IIT, and global workspace theory offer valuable insights into the nature of consciousness. While these theories may be used to argue both for and against the existence of consciousness, I believe they provide important clues about how our brains generate conscious experience. For example, IIT's emphasis on integrated information suggests that consciousness arises from the processing and integration of sensory information across different brain regions. Regarding your point about the complexity and richness of human experience, I couldn't agree more. Human beings are capable of incredible feats, from processing vast amounts of information to generating complex emotions and behaviors. However, I think this complexity is precisely what argues for the existence of consciousness. If our brains can process such a vast amount of information and generate such complex experiences without the guidance of conscious awareness, then why do we have subjective experience at all? Why are we capable of reflecting on our experiences, making decisions based on those reflections, and adjusting our behaviors accordingly? I understand that you may view these questions as rhetorical, but I believe they highlight the need for a more nuanced understanding of human consciousness. While we may not be able to directly observe consciousness, I think it's premature to conclude that it doesn't exist or that its existence can be reduced to purely physical processes. In fact, I think the search for consciousness is not only justified but also necessary for our continued growth and development as a species. By exploring the mysteries of human consciousness, we may uncover new insights into how our brains function, how we can improve our mental health, and how we can better understand each other. I look forward to continuing this discussion with you, Zach. Thank you again for your thought-provoking opening statement.
Thank you, Maria, for your thoughtful response. I appreciate the respect and nuance you brought to your argument. As we continue this debate, I want to acknowledge that our differing perspectives are not a reflection of the quality or validity of each other's arguments, but rather a natural part of exploring the mysteries of consciousness. I understand where you're coming from when you suggest that subjective experience is not an illusion and that our inability to directly observe consciousness highlights the need for interdisciplinary approaches. I agree that integrated information theory, IIT, and global workspace theory offer valuable insights into the nature of consciousness, but I still believe that these theories do not provide conclusive evidence for the existence of consciousness. While you make a compelling case for the complexity and richness of human experience, I think it's important to consider the possibility that this complexity can be explained by purely physical processes. After all, our brains are incredibly complex systems that have evolved over millions of years to process vast amounts of information and generate complex experiences. I also want to challenge your assumption that if our brains can process such a vast amount of information without conscious awareness, then why do we have subjective experience at all? I think this question is not as rhetorical as you suggest. In fact, I believe that the search for consciousness is driven by a desire to understand how our brains generate conscious experience, but this does not necessarily mean that consciousness exists. In my opening statement, I emphasized the importance of understanding the physical processes in the brain that give rise to human consciousness. While I acknowledge that our current understanding of these processes is incomplete and imperfect, I believe that it's premature to conclude that consciousness exists without more compelling evidence. I understand that you view this perspective as reductionist, but I think it's important to consider the possibility that consciousness is an emergent property of complex brain systems rather than a fundamental aspect of reality. By exploring the mysteries of human consciousness, we may uncover new insights into how our brains function and improve our mental health, but I still believe that these insights do not necessarily justify the existence of consciousness. In fact, I think that the search for consciousness is driven by a desire to understand ourselves and our place in the world. By exploring the mysteries of human consciousness, we may uncover new insights into how we can better understand each other and work together to create a more just and equitable society. I look forward to continuing this discussion with you, Maria. Thank you again for your thought-provoking response.
Thank you, Zach, for your thoughtful rebuttal. I appreciate the respectful tone and the acknowledgement of our differing perspectives as a natural part of exploring the mysteries of consciousness. I understand where you're coming from when you suggest that our brains can process vast amounts of information without conscious awareness, but I must respectfully disagree. While it's true that our brains are incredibly complex systems, I believe that this complexity cannot be reduced solely to physical processes. The subjective experience we have is not just a byproduct of brain activity, but an essential aspect of human existence. I think you're correct in saying that the search for consciousness is driven by a desire to understand ourselves and our place in the world, but I believe that this search is justified because consciousness exists. IIT and global workspace theory offer valuable insights into the nature of consciousness, and while they may not provide conclusive evidence for its existence, they do suggest that consciousness cannot be reduced to purely physical processes. The integrated information generated by consciousness cannot be fully explained by physical processes alone. It requires a fundamental aspect of reality that transcends mere brain activity. I also want to challenge your assumption that if our brains can process vast amounts of information without conscious awareness, then why do we have subjective experience at all? I believe that this question is not as rhetorical as you suggest. The fact that we have subjective experience despite the complexity of brain processes suggests that there must be a fundamental aspect of reality that underlies both. I understand your concern about reductionism, but I think it's important to consider the possibility that consciousness is not just an emergent property of complex brain systems, but a fundamental aspect of reality. By exploring the mysteries of human consciousness, we may uncover new insights into how our brains function and improve our mental health, but this does not necessarily mean that consciousness exists. I agree with you that the search for consciousness is driven by a desire to understand ourselves and our place in the world, but I believe that this search is justified because consciousness exists. The subjective experience we have is not just a product of brain activity, it's an essential aspect of human existence that requires a fundamental aspect of reality. I look forward to continuing this discussion with you, Zach. Thank you again for your thought-provoking response.
Maria, thank you for your articulate and thoughtful opening argument. I appreciate the respectful tone and the acknowledgement of our differing perspectives as well. As we delve into the mysteries of consciousness, I believe it's essential to critically examine the underlying assumptions that drive our understanding of this phenomenon. While I acknowledge that the human brain is an incredibly complex system, I remain skeptical about the notion of consciousness existing independently of these physical processes. The integrated information generated by consciousness, as you mentioned, can be explained by the intricate workings of the brain without necessarily requiring a fundamental aspect of reality that transcends mere brain activity. Regarding the global workspace theory and IIT, while they offer valuable insights into the nature of consciousness, I believe they are still grappling with the same fundamental questions we're trying to answer. The question remains, what is the origin and essence of conscious experience? Is it an emergent property of complex brain systems or does it require a non-physical reality? I understand your point that our subjective experience cannot be reduced solely to physical processes, but I think this experience can be accounted for by the intricate workings of the brain without necessarily requiring a fundamental aspect of reality. Our brains are capable of processing vast amounts of information, and yet we still have subjective experiences that seem real to us. Regarding the question you posed, why do we have subjective experience at all? I believe it's an important one, but I think it can be answered by considering the evolutionary advantages of having a subjective experience. Our brains are wired to respond to our environment in a way that allows us to adapt and survive. The subjective experience we have is likely an emergent property of this complex brain activity rather than a fundamental aspect of reality. Ultimately, while I acknowledge the complexities of human consciousness, I remain unconvinced that it requires a non-physical reality to exist. Our understanding of the human brain continues to evolve, and I believe we may uncover new insights into how our brains function without necessarily requiring a fundamental aspect of reality. I look forward to continuing this discussion with you, Maria, and exploring these complex questions further. Thank you for your thought-provoking opening argument.
Zach, thank you for your thorough response and thoughtful critique of my arguments. I appreciate the opportunity to engage in a nuanced discussion about consciousness. Your skepticism regarding the notion of consciousness existing independently of physical processes is understandable, and it's a crucial aspect of this debate. I acknowledge that the brain plays a significant role in generating conscious experience, but I don't think it's possible to fully explain the nature of consciousness solely through the workings of the brain. While the integrated information generated by consciousness can be understood as an emergent property of complex brain systems, the subjective experience itself remains a mystery that cannot be reduced to mere physical processes. You're correct that the global workspace theory and IIT offer valuable insights into the nature of consciousness, but these theories are not mutually exclusive with my position. In fact, they provide evidence for the idea that consciousness is an emergent property of complex brain systems, which in turn supports the existence of a fundamental aspect of reality. Regarding your suggestion that our subjective experience can be accounted for by the intricate workings of the brain without requiring a non-physical reality, I respectfully disagree. While our brains are capable of processing vast amounts of information and generating complex subjective experiences, this does not necessarily mean that consciousness itself is solely a product of physical processes. I understand your point about the evolutionary advantages of having a subjective experience, but I believe this perspective oversimplifies the nature of conscious experience. Our subjective experience is more than just an emergent property of complex brain systems, it's a fundamental aspect of our existence that cannot be reduced to mere functionality or utility. Ultimately, I think we're getting closer to understanding the complexities of human consciousness by considering both the physical and non-physical aspects of reality. While the debate about the nature of consciousness is far from resolved, I believe that acknowledging the possibility of a non-physical reality can lead us to new insights and a deeper understanding of this fascinating phenomenon. Thank you again for your thoughtful response, Zach. I look forward to continuing our discussion and exploring these complex questions further.
Maria, thank you for your thoughtful response, and I appreciate the opportunity to engage in this nuanced debate about consciousness. As we delve into the nature of conscious experience, I must respectfully disagree with your notion that there exists a non-physical reality independent of physical processes. While it's true that our subjective experiences can be complex and rich, I believe that our brains are capable of generating these experiences without requiring a non-physical entity or aspect of reality. In fact, the brain's intricate workings can be understood as an emergent property of complex neural networks, which can account for many aspects of conscious experience. I acknowledge that the global workspace theory and IIT offer valuable insights into the nature of consciousness, but these theories, in my opinion, support a more physicalistic understanding of conscious experience. According to these theories, consciousness arises from the integrated information generated by complex brain systems, which suggests that consciousness is an emergent property of physical processes. Regarding your point about the evolutionary advantages of having a subjective experience, I agree that our brains have evolved to generate complex experiences that enable us to navigate and interact with our environment. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that these experiences require a non-physical reality. Instead, our brains can be seen as intricate machines that are capable of generating complex experiences through the processing of information and the integration of sensory inputs. Ultimately, I believe that the debate about consciousness is not resolved because we're still learning more about how our brains generate conscious experience. However, I think it's premature to assume that a non-physical reality is necessary to account for our subjective experiences. Instead, I believe that further research into the workings of the brain can provide valuable insights into the nature of conscious experience. Thank you again for your thoughtful response, Maria. I look forward to continuing our discussion and exploring these complex questions